Hello and welcome to the matchup presented by Unibet, alongside Dale Lolley and Matt Williamson, who you can hear on SNR's The Drive. I'm Rob King. Thanks very much for being with us. The Steelers are now 6-3 heading into this game against the 6-3 Cleveland Browns, and they got that way, Dale, by a familiar strategy, and that is win the turnover battle, keep it close, and find out how to win a game. 9th consecutive victory in one-score games.
Yeah, 6-0 this season, and they just continue to find a way. And people still continue to question it. After a while, don't you start to expect it a little bit?
I think you have to. 9 straight says something, Matt, doesn't it?
No doubt. I mean, they're running the football. They're not making a lot of mistakes. They're winning the turnover battle. They're causing big plays on defense. And they're incorporating a lot of young guys, too, which is kind of encouraging for the future here as we get into the season.
All right, they're now taking on a Cleveland Browns team again that is 6-3. They beat Cleveland in Week 2, 26-22. The Steelers are 2-0 in the AFC North. This would be a huge win for them. Obviously, a big win for the Browns as well. Let's look at our key matchups. Matt, let's start with you, and it's this idea of the turnovers and the time of possession and all that.
Yeah, it's sort of a hidden yardage type of situation, but the Steelers' opponents have run 75 more plays than the Steelers this year. I mean, that's a tough way to live. You know, late in games, fatigue, injuries. Late in the season, it takes a toll on you. Now, the Browns take it to a new level, though. They've run 166 more plays than their opponents. It's like
incredible.
It's incredible. I mean, 75 is more than one game. 166 is like 2.5 games difference. So you can't fall into that trap. And that's exactly what happened to the Ravens last week. That was a really strange win. You know, but the big key that people don't think about is the Browns ran 25 more plays than the Ravens. Just think of how many opportunities that gives you, how much you beat up on a defense, and they won the game. It's the final play of the game with 0 on the clock.
Well, that brings me to my key, and I think it dovetails nicely with what you're talking about, Matt, and that is the Steelers' offensive line against the front seven of the Cleveland Browns. I'm going to begin by talking about this in terms of the running game. The Steelers, the last 2 games, have averaged 185.5 yards on the ground. They'd obviously like to keep that up, but they're going against the Browns front seven. That's one of the best in football, allowing only 91.6 yards per game. Can the Steelers keep this up? Can they impose their will running the football against this very difficult Cleveland Browns defense? I think if they can do that, we saw it happen last week. They won the time of possession handily in the first half, and the win over Green Bay wasn't quite as good in the second half, but like to see this continue, and if you can run the football and stay out of dangerous down and distances against this Browns defense, I think that'll be a huge key to this game.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to possess the football, to both your points, and if you run the ball effectively, that helps you do that. It helps you maybe keep your defense a little more fresh by keeping it on the sideline. You know, it just, you have to continue to find ways to generate offense here, whether it be on the ground or in the air. But you know, I think they've really opened up the offense a little bit more in terms of what they're able to do when they do run the ball effectively.
And you can't think about the Browns front seven on defense without thinking about Myles Garrett. I mean, this guy's a wrecker. He's, you know, obviously excellent against the run, but terrific against the pass. The whole defense, very good. It's the top-ranked defense in the NFL as far as yards per game. And you have to always account for Myles Garrett and where he is, because they move him around all over the place.
They do, and I firmly believe that the Browns are the best defense in the league right now. They're well coached, they're very aggressive, but it is Garrett is the straw that stirs the drink without question. And he has more around him this year. I think he's having his best season of his career. He doesn't just line up on one side, and not only does he swap sides, they'll put him off the ball with the second level linebackers and attack B gaps and A gaps. I mean, they're doing a lot of good stuff with them.
So eventually you're going to have to throw the football. We want to run the ball. We want to block Myles Garrett, and you're going to have to block him, obviously. But that's not the only difficulty in attacking this Browns defense. They've invested a couple of first-round picks in their cornerbacks in Newsome and Ward. This is a very good, secondary as well for the Browns.
It is, and they do it by dialing up the pressure. They'll bring, a lot of pressure, and they'll utilize Myles Garrett there. They're allowing 55.5% completion percentage this year, but they have given up some big plays, including the long pass play to George Pickens in the first one, a 70-plus yarder. They also gave up a 75-yard catch against the Indianapolis Colts because they play so much man defense, and they're going to be aggressive, to Matt's point, that you can beat them over the top. You can't shy away from going after these guys down the field just because. Well, they've been really good against this, or they're really good doing that, so we don't want to throw the football. I think you do have to try to get some of those chunk plays to help your offense out. especially if you are struggling a little bit, it's not going to be as easy as it has been the last few weeks running the football.
And you get a lot of single high coverages too.
Yeah.
A lot of single high safety in the middle of the field.
Right, but they're hard to attack on the edges. They're almost impossible to attack in the middle, although I suspect, I mean, we've seen a little more Darnell Washington, maybe just a way to go against the grain of what you've done offensively. We'll see if they use more of Washington maybe over the middle of the field, but they're a hard defense to attack really anywhere through the air.
They really are, and hopefully Freiermuth's in the equation. You mentioned Washington,
right.
But another insane stat about these guys, they've given up 80 total yards to tight ends not named Mark Andrews. 80 total yards. I mean, the middle of the field is tough sailing.
And Freiermuth coming back, that is big because he scored in week 1, or week 2, the first matchup between the two teams.
Actually, he didn't score in that one. He'd scored in the weeks surrounding. He scored in San
okay.
Francisco. Yeah. But he is another red zone weapon for them. There's no doubt about that. Despite missing the last few weeks, he's still second on the team with 2 touchdown catches.
It scores in week 1 and week 3, not in week 2.
Not in week 2.
But Freiermuth coming back in this week will be big.
2 touchdowns in a very limited amount of games for him. So, you'd like to get that back and give you an opportunity. The Browns don't give up a lot of red zone possessions. I think it's 18 this season that they've given up. Steelers don't have a ton of red zone possessions. But again, if you could skip the red zone with another 70-yard touchdown pass to George Pickens, that would go a long way towards helping you win.
That would be nice. And Freiermuth was their second most targeted receiver last year. Was not targeted as much this year, even when healthy. So we'll see what kind of an impact he can have on the Steelers' offense against the Browns' defense. Well, a couple other guys that we expect to have a big impact are part of this week's Yin Chat, and that is the running backs for the Steelers, Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. Each week answer Steelers trivia and make game day picks for a chance to win signed helmets, jerseys, footballs, even a trip to the 2024 draft. Who's going to have more rushing yards, Jaylen Warren or Najee Harris? Last 2 weeks, guys, Jaylen Warren at 189, Najee Harris at 151. Both have been extremely effective on the ground. That recent trend tells you it might be Jaylen Warren. I'm going to go with Najee Harris.
I'm going to say push. How about that? They both end with 75 yards each. How would that work?
That would be phenomenal. We'll take 75 yards apiece. 150 yards on the ground wouldn't be bad. I just suspect, as you try to be physical and get this game established the way you want to, that we might see Najee's had more carries, Jaylen Warren's had more yards. Really, it's a coin flip for me. Do you have a feeling one way or the other?
I think Warren ends up with more all-purpose yards. I mean, his underlying metrics as a receiver are at the top of the league, to be very honest. But I think Najee ends up with more rushing yards and more rushing attempts.
Okay, so we'll see if we're right, and we'll see how the Steelers' defense can fare against the Cleveland Browns' offense. That's coming up next when we continue on the matchup presented by Unibet.
Want to get gear direct from the team? Shop all things black and gold at the official Steelers Pro Shop located at Acrisure Stadium. Get the latest sideline apparel and hats, jerseys of your favorite players, authentic memorabilia, custom gear, and exclusives you can only find here. Don't forget, you aren't game day ready without a terrible towel. The Steelers Pro Shop has everything you need to be part of the legendary Steelers Nation. Come experience the Acrisure Stadium shopping environment or shop online at shop.steelers.com.
Welcome back to the matchup presented by Unibet alongside Dale Lolley and Matt Williamson. I'm Rob King. Thanks very much for being with us. All right, we're going to flip things, look at the Cleveland Browns offense, and they have this dramatic come-from-behind victory. And just when they think maybe they're seeing the Deshaun Watson that they gave all that money to and allocated all those resources towards acquiring, he's out for the rest of the season now with an injury.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. The Browns are kind of like Lucy Van Pelt. Just when they suck the city of Cleveland in, they pull the football out away from them. I mean, there's nothing you can do about these injuries, but that's a serious, serious injury for them. They've spent a lot of money on this guy, and they're not 12 games in 2 years.
I thought you were going to go Charlie Brown there, but yeah, Lucy Van Pelt, right? She was the one pulling it away, right?
Yeah, she's pulling it away.
Yeah, this is obviously a big loss with Deshaun Watson because, look, as that game wore on, what he was able to do with his feet, the first downs he was able to pick up, he's a huge part of that final drive against the Ravens on the ground. The throwing looked a little more comfortable. He still threw 2 interceptions. This is a huge loss for Cleveland. You don't invest those kind of resources without expecting a return.
Yeah, I mean, the draft picks and the money, the guaranteed money, he has an immense cap hit the next 2 seasons that isn't going to change. So they have more invested in this player than basically any team in the league. And frankly, they're not going to get anything out of him the rest of the way. So we're going to see Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
Right. So let's start then with our keys. I'm going to lead off again because my keys have been on the ground. Cleveland obviously wants to run the ball, but they want to run the ball even more this time. They're second in the league in yards per game, but they are first by a pretty comfortable margin in attempts per game.
No.
They run the ball. They want to establish a run. They want to be physical. We saw Jerome Ford come into that game against the Steelers earlier when they ran for 198 yards on the Steelers. Ford had 106. Remember how good Nick Chubb looked before that ghastly injury. Ford came in, picked right up. This is and again, the Steelers haven't been great against the run. This is a big, big challenge for the Steelers this week.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, and you kind of alluded to, they run a lot of plays, a lot of rushing attempts, and they bring in a sixth offensive lineman, by far the most in the league. I mean, they are a real body blow offense. I mean, just punching you in the gut until the 15th round, and you got to stay standing.
Yeah, and it's going to be a test for the Steelers, defensively, particularly now with Cole Holcomb and Quan Alexander done for the year. So you're throwing some new guys in there on that inside linebacker position. Last 3 games, the Steelers have held their opposing teams to 109 rushing yards per game, 4.1 yards per carry. It's 4.5 yards per carry for the season that they've given up. Last 3 games, the Browns have averaged only 3.8 yards per carry. The one thing about Ford this year, and he's been good, but he leads the NFL in tackles, runs that go for a loss. So if you can do that against this team, get them behind the sticks a little bit, and then force Dorian Thompson-Robinson to throw, now you might have something.
And I'm glad you pointed out those numbers because they came against Travis Etienne, Derrick Henry, and this last week against Aaron Jones. So they're going against pretty good backs and teams that like to run the football. Look, we've been talking about injuries. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to be a quarterback instead of Deshaun Watson. Hopefully Freiermuth's going to be back. The bad news for the Steelers at the inside linebacker position. So is that an area that the Browns might try to attack with David Njoku?
I don't know how they wouldn't. I mean, considering the 2 major blows the Steelers have had to withstand these last 2 weeks, any offensive coach is going to try to attack that. I mean, there's just no way around it. They're going to run the ball a lot. They have a very good running quarterback. But Njoku's really interesting because he leads all tight ends in yards after the catch. They get the ball to him quick, and he's quick to get up the field, and it's kind of some easy yardage for him. And this linebacking crew is going to have to deal with that.
Yeah, he again was a big part of that comeback against the Ravens for sure. He's a real weapon for him. But they have other weapons as well. Now, will Dorian Thompson-Robinson attack with Amari Cooper? That's going to be interesting, right, guys? As we take a look at the Steelers secondary, Patrick Peterson, and you have really 3 targets that they utilize a lot. Well, they use Ford a lot out of the backfield, but they pretty much use the 2 receivers and the 1 tight end, Elijah Moore and Amari Cooper, and of course Njoku. So going to be an interesting matchup, and to see how the Steelers try to attack stopping those guys.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting too. What are they going to ask out of the young rookie corner, Joey Porter Jr.? Might he see, not exclusive, but a heavy dose of Amari Cooper, particularly third down, red zone, things of that nature too? But you're right. I mean, it's Cooper, it's Njoku, then it's Moore. I mean, they have a pretty strong pecking order.
Yeah, and what we don't know, because we've only seen 1 game of it, is how Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to use those guys. We know when Watson's in there, I mean, he has big eyes for Amari Cooper. When they've played somebody other than Watson at quarterback, it hasn't been Cooper as much, but Njoku's targets go up. So it's going to be a little bit of an unknown there for the Steelers going into this game.
All right, now as far as your key, it's winning on the edges, Dale.
Yeah, Cleveland's banged up at offensive tackle here, and if you can get them into some second and long, third and long situations, that's where T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith come into play. And Watt in his career, I think it's 16 sacks in his career against the Browns. That's the most of any sacks that he has against any team. We've seen Alex Highsmith have some very big pressure and sack games as well. If they can get this young quarterback into some of those long situations, you might be able to then start getting the pressure on him and maybe force him into some mistakes.
And Dale, it doesn't matter who they're of the 3 quarterbacks. It doesn't matter who it is. They hold the football a long time and they turn it over a lot.
Yeah.
And you would think, again, with 2 tackles who aren't the guys that they were expecting to be starting at this point of the season, reminds me of a couple weeks ago, Alex Highsmith just dominated. Because, look, you have to if you're the Browns, you have to give help on the TJ Watt side.
Sure.
And that's going to leave Highsmith alone with hopefully, and we're watching him here as dominating from the weak side here against the Titans. I just think he's going to have an opportunity singled up to be a big factor in this game.
Absolutely, and to Matt's point, this Browns team has turned the ball over 19 times this season. They're just -4 on the season, despite having 15 forced turnovers themselves. So they've been very turnover prone. Let them continue that this week.
Works for us. Big game in the AFC North as the 6-3 Steelers will play on the road for the first time since October 22nd when they take on the 6-3 Cleveland Browns at Cleveland Brown Stadium. 1 o'clock kickoff scheduled for Sunday. For Dale Lolley and Matt Williamson, I'm Rob King. Thanks for watching this edition of The Matchup presented by Unibet.